Filthy animals like you belong in cages, not courthouses. The words still vibrated in the air as Officer Brian Cooper's hand cracked across Alicia Brown's face, a sound that drew gasps from bystanders climbing the marble steps of the Jefferson County Courthouse. The sting seared into her jaw, but she didn't cry out. Her briefcase had flown from her hand, scattering confidential legal files across the ground. Memos, motions, evidence reports, papers she had reviewed just hours earlier at her kitchen table with her morning coffee. Now they fluttered around like discarded scraps while Cooper grabbed her by the throat and slammed her into the courthouse wall, his uniform pressed against her like a weaponized shield. The bronze nameplate glimmered above them. The Honorable Judge Alicia Brown, presiding. The irony of it nearly made her laugh. Think you can just stroll into this building with stolen files? Cooper sneered. You rats never learn. Her wrists snapped into cold steel cuffs. The bite of metal was sharp, intimate, worse because she knew it too well from decades of sentencing criminals who wore those same shackles. Two other officers, James Miller and David Clark, stood nearby chuckling. One of them raised his phone, recording. The lens caught Alicia's bruised cheek, her disheveled blouse, the absurd image of a federal judge treated like street trash. Inside the courthouse, minutes later, the script flipped. Cooper straightened his tie, smoothed his uniform, and strode into the courtroom with swagger. To him, this was routine. Arrest, embellish, testify, walk out a hero. His record was polished with dozens of such encounters, and no one ever questioned the cop over the suspect. Especially when the suspect looked like Alicia did, in plain clothes, brown skin, and dignity stripped away by handcuffs. Judge Richard Hale, gaunt, 63, sat in the temporary seat. He glanced down at the docket without much interest. Cooper began his testimony, voice steady, confident. Your Honor, I was conducting routine security protocols when I observed a suspicious individual attempting to breach courthouse security. The defendant became agitated when I requested identification, refused lawful commands, and resisted arrest. I used only the minimum necessary force. His words dripped honey, rehearsed from years of courtroom performance. Across the aisle, Prosecutor Linda Myers nodded approvingly. Officer Cooper, in your 15 years of service, have you encountered individuals like this before? Yes, ma'am, he said, swelling with fake righteousness. They always play the victim, claim discrimination, claim they're judges, lawyers, senators. Same playbook every time. From the gallery, Miller and Clark exchanged smirks. They'd heard this routine before. Different face, same lie. Alicia sat at the defendant's table, cuffed, a bruise rising across her cheekbone. Her eyes burned not with shame but with fury sharpened into steel. She was memorizing every phrase, every false note, cataloging it all like evidence. Did she attempt to flee? Judge Hale asked. Absolutely, Cooper said, voice bold. She fought back. I had to subdue her. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his notes, the only crack in his armor. From the back row, Clerk Emily Foster frowned. Something about this woman's voice earlier, the way she carried herself, it tugged at her memory. Officer Miller, Myers asked, did you witness the defendant's behavior? Yes, ma'am, Miller said. Officer Cooper acted with professionalism. The woman was clearly unstable. And Officer Clark? Same account. Your Honor. Their lies stacked up like bricks, building the wall that would bury Alicia, if she let them. When asked if he had evidence, Cooper produced his phone. Body cam malfunctioned this morning, unfortunately, but I have partial footage. The clip he showed began halfway through. Alicia already restrained, struggling against cuffs. Convenient, Alicia murmured, her first words. Excuse me? Judge Hale asked. Nothing. Your Honor. Her calm tone unsettled him. She didn't sound like a cornered defendant. She sounded like someone with cards still hidden. Linda Myers smirked. The state recommends charges of trespassing, resisting arrest, and assault on a police officer. Everything was unfolding exactly as Cooper wanted. Another easy win. Another reminder that his badge was a shield stronger than truth. But then Alicia rose slowly from her chair, the clink of chains echoing in the hushed courtroom. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said clearly. "I appreciate the opportunity to address these allegations." Judge Hale frowned. Something in her voice, measured, precise, authoritative, didn't match the profile of a trespasser. "First," Alicia began, "Officer Cooper claims I was trespassing. In reality, I was walking on a public sidewalk approaching the courthouse entrance at approximately 8:47 m. As this court surely knows, Supreme Court precedent recognizes public sidewalks adjacent to government buildings as traditional public forums protected by the First Amendment." The stenographer's fingers faltered. Myers shifted uncomfortably. "And second," Alicia continued, "the documents I carried were not stolen. They are official case files, memoranda, and correspondence, authentic, and legitimately in my possession in my professional capacity." Judge Hale raised a brow. "And what exactly is your profession, Miss Alicia Brown?" she said evenly. A small smile touched her lips. "Dr. Brown, to be precise, we'll discuss my credentials shortly, Your Honor." A ripple of unease passed through the room. Cooper's eyes narrowed. Something about this woman suddenly felt dangerous. "And third," Alicia went on, "regarding his claim of body cam malfunction, this courthouse has high-definition surveillance cameras every 15 feet along the main approach. I formally request a preservation order for all footage between 8:45 and 9:15 a.m., including backups from officer body cams and mobile devices." Objection exploded from Myers. "The defendant cannot demand evidence. Pro se defendants have a Sixth Amendment right to present evidence." Alicia shot back, voice razor sharp. "And under Brady v. Maryland, the prosecution is obligated to preserve exculpatory material. This court knows that." The silence was electric. Even Judge Hale leaned back, unsettled. "You seem unusually familiar with legal procedure. Ms. Brown, do you have formal legal training?" "I have some experience," she said lightly, but her eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. Then she reached into her jacket, pulling out a credential wallet, gold embossed, unmistakable. The judicial seal glinted beneath the fluorescent lights. "Your Honor," she said, voice soft but commanding, "perhaps this court should recess. There seems to be a grave misunderstanding about who exactly Officer Cooper assaulted this morning." Bailiff Thomas Green went pale. He'd seen her face every day for 3 years. The gavel struck. "Court will recess for 15 minutes. Cooper's confidence wavered for the first time. He suddenly realized he might not understand the rules of the game he thought he was winning. The courthouse was buzzing like a disturbed hive. Reporters who had come to cover a dull docket of procedural hearings now swarmed the marble hallways, whispering fragments of rumor they had overheard. Clerks darted from office to office. Their whispers carried like sparks. "Judge Brown is the defendant? She was in cuffs? Officer Cooper laid hands on her?" 15 minutes of recess stretched into eternity. In a holding room off the corridor, Judge Alicia Brown sat in her chair, robes now draped across her shoulders. Her cheeks still burned purple from the strike, but the cloth of authority transformed her. She was no longer the silent defendant. She was the judge, the embodiment of law in this courthouse. Bailiff Thomas Green stood beside her, pale as paper. "Your Honor, I swear I didn't." "I know, Thomas," Alicia interrupted gently. "You didn't see it coming, but listen to me now. I need you to keep your composure. We're not just in a courtroom anymore. We're in a spotlight." Green nodded, though his hands still shook. Meanwhile, across the lobby, Officer Brian Cooper leaned against a vending machine, his phone buzzing nonstop. Messages poured in from colleagues, some congratulating him on another takedown, others warning him that something was off. He scrolled, sweat starting to pool under his collar. One message froze him. Bro, footage is already on Twitter. Someone posted the whole thing from across the street. His stomach lurched. At 10:12 a.m., the first shaky cell phone video hit social media. A paralegal on her way to work had caught the entire confrontation on her iPhone. Cooper's slap, his words, the handcuffs biting into Alicia's wrist beneath her own nameplate. She had uploaded it with a caption. This just happened outside Jefferson County Courthouse. That woman is Judge Alicia Brown. A cop just assaulted her. Justice for Judge Brown. Chiaka's short accountability now. Within minutes, it was trending. By noon, the video had been shared over 200,000 times. On Twitter, hashtags multiplied. EUA, Justice for Judge Brown. Sudurdur Cop accountability. Shuanakawi, Brian Cooper exposed. Shunner courthouse assault. On TikTok, users spliced the clip with reaction videos, some screaming in disbelief, others crying, others narrating over the footage with captions like, "This is what systemic racism looks like, caught on camera." On Instagram, activists reposted the still frame of Alicia's face twisted from the slap. The bronze plaque above her reading, Judge A. Brown. The image became an instant symbol, shared across feeds like wildfire. Inside her chambers, Alicia finally reclaimed her phone. Her screen lit up with hundreds of missed calls. Clerk Emily Foster had left frantic voicemails. Judge Brown, CNN just called. They know something happened. They want a statement. Your Honor, NBC is camped outside already. People are chanting in front of the courthouse. Alicia scrolled through Twitter, watching the narrative spiral. It was surreal seeing her own assault turned into a meme. Her bruised cheek already stamped onto protest posters by anonymous graphic designers. She exhaled slowly. It's begun. At the police department downtown, panic was spreading. Chief officers huddled in closed rooms, trying to draft a statement. They had seen viral storms before, but never one involving a federal judge. This could burn us down, one captain muttered. Control the narrative, another said. Say it's under review. Promise transparency. Buy time. But time was slipping. Every major news network had already picked up the video. CNN's Kyron read, breaking viral video appears to show officer assaulting sitting judge outside courthouse. Fox News ran with, shocking, altercation at courthouse sparks. Outrage, judge identified as victim. MSNBC brought on civil rights lawyers, their voices shaking with fury. This isn't just misconduct, one attorney declared. This is an outright hate crime against a sitting judge. By 3 p.m., protests had formed on the courthouse steps. What had begun as a handful of activists grew into hundreds. Handmade signs bobbed above the crowd. No one above the law. Justice for Brown. End police impunity. Chants echoed off the marble columns. Who do you protect? Who do you serve? Inside, courthouse staff peered nervously through windows. Judge Richard Hale, rattled by his morning humiliation, locked his chamber's door. Prosecutor Linda Myers avoided reporters, her statement of support for Cooper now circulating online like a scarlet letter. At 5 p.m., Alicia sat in her chambers with Chief Judge Eleanor Davis on speakerphone. You're trending worldwide, Alicia, Eleanor said, voice grave. This isn't just local anymore. BBC, Al Jazeera, they're running it. The Attorney General's office is calling. Even the White House has asked for a briefing. I warned you, Alicia replied calmly. The rot wasn't hidden. It just needed light. Light? Davis sighed. This is a wildfire. Meanwhile, Brian Cooper's name and address had been leaked online. Protesters swarmed his suburban home, media vans clogging the street. His wife and teenage son fled under police escort, faces hidden behind jackets. Reddit threads dug up his complaint history. piecing together patterns that internal affairs had buried for years. Old victims began coming forward, posting their stories beneath the trending hashtags. I was 17 when Officer Cooper arrested me for trespassing. Error, he slammed me into a wall just like that judge. Charges dropped later. Now I know why. He called me an animal too. I thought no one would believe me. Thank you, Judge Brown. The dam had burst. By evening, the Jefferson Courthouse looked like a fortress under siege. Police barricades ringed the building, but the crowd only grew louder. Helicopters hovered overhead, their spotlights cutting across handmade banners demanding justice. Inside, Alicia refused to leave. This isn't the time to hide, she told Green and Foster. If the system collapses in silence, it dies. We confront this head-on. She drafted a short statement on her official letterhead. With Green trembling at her side, she stepped outside onto the courthouse steps, microphones shoved toward her, cameras blazing. My name is Judge Alicia Brown, she said, her voice carrying over the chants. This morning, I was assaulted outside this courthouse by Officer Brian Cooper. Millions of you have now seen the footage. I want you to know two things. I am not afraid, and justice will prevail. The crowd roared. This is not just about me, she continued. It is about every citizen who has ever been silenced, every complaint dismissed, every victim told they didn't matter. What happened to me today happens every day in America to people without a platform, without a title, without a robe. Today, the truth is visible. Tomorrow, accountability begins. Her bruise glistened under camera flashes. She looked like both victim and warrior. The clip of her speech went viral within minutes. News anchors replayed it on loop. Activists hailed her courage. Politicians scrambled to issue statements. By nightfall, presidential candidates were weighing in, each trying to claim moral high ground. The Department of Justice announced it was monitoring developments closely, and Officer Cooper. He sat alone in an interrogation room, stripped of his badge, the noise of chanting protesters echoing through the concrete walls. For the first time in his career, the system wasn't rushing to protect him. The storm was only beginning. By sunrise the next morning, the Jefferson County Courthouse looked less like a hall of justice and more like a war zone. National Guard Humvees idled along barricaded streets. Police officers in riot gear formed uneasy lines. Reporters jostled for position on the courthouse lawn, their satellite trucks stretching for blocks. The hashtags that had exploded overnight hardened into banners of war. Justice for Judge Brown became a rallying cry, painted across protest signs, screen printed on t-shirts, scrawled in chalk on courthouse walls. Feuber for Stand with Cooper rose in response, fueled by police unions and far-right commentators who argued that Officer Brian Cooper was being lynched by the media. Cable news played the video of the slap on an endless loop. But depending on the channel, the narrative shifted. On MSNBC, a federal judge assaulted in broad daylight. This is systemic racism laid bare. On Fox News, was this a case of mistaken identity? Officer Cooper followed protocol. Did social media rush to judgment? On CNN, split-screen panels screamed at each other while the video replayed silently in the background. The nation had chosen sides overnight. In Washington, pressure mounted. The Attorney General's office received more than 50,000 calls in 24 hours demanding federal charges against Cooper. The FBI's Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation before lunch. Director statements leaked to the press. One read, "We cannot ignore video evidence of an assault against a sitting judge. This may constitute both civil rights violations and obstruction of justice." But inside the FBI, some agents balked. "She's not just a victim," one whispered in a hallway conversation. "She's a sitting federal judge. This case is radioactive." Political fault lines widened. Senators demanded hearings. Civil rights leaders called for nationwide police reform. Police unions doubled down, launching ad campaigns painting Cooper as A decorated veteran officer betrayed by a broken system. The story wasn't about one courthouse anymore. It was about America itself. Judge Alicia Brown sat in her chambers, robe draped over her shoulders, eyes fixed on the stack of legal briefs piling up on her desk. Reporters screamed her name outside, but inside she was calm, methodical. "Your phone's exploding, Judge," Clerk Emily Foster said nervously, scrolling through endless notifications. CNN, NBC, BBC, even Oprah's team is asking for an interview. Half the internet wants you to run for Senate. The other half is calling you a fraud. Alicia smiled faintly. That means I'm exactly where I need to be, standing on the fault line. But she wasn't naive. She knew the storm outside wasn't just noise. It was political capital, and everyone from city councilmen to presidential hopefuls was trying to cash in. At Cooper's disciplinary hearing, the officer sat stone-faced, flanked by union representatives. His lawyer, Michael Carter, thundered, "This is trial by media. Officer Cooper is being railroaded because of a video stripped of context. He was doing his duty, ensuring courthouse security. No one knew this woman was a judge. This is a witch hunt." Outside, his supporters gathered, mostly off-duty cops and sympathetic citizens, waving flags that read, "Back the Blue." Counter-protesters stood across the street, their chants clashing in a deafening chorus. "Justice for Brown! Justice for Cooper!" A single spark could have ignited the crowd. Meanwhile, the FBI quietly reached out to Alicia. Agents visited her chambers, badges flashing, their tone both respectful and cautious. "Judge Brown," one agent said, "we're under immense pressure to move quickly, but you need to understand, the moment you became the victim, you also became the center of the storm. Some will say you can't preside impartially. Others will call you an activist in robes. Are you ready for that?" Alicia looked him dead in the eye. "I didn't ask for this storm, but if it takes me to the center of it to expose the truth, so be it. I've been preparing for this fight my whole life." The next day, the White House briefing room was electric. Reporters shouted over one another. Does the president support Judge Brown? Should Officer Cooper be prosecuted federally? Is this case evidence of systemic bias in law enforcement? The press secretary dodged, but the tension was obvious. The story had become a litmus test for every politician in the country. And in living rooms across America, families fought, parents argued with children, friends unfollowed each other on Facebook. Some saw Alicia as a hero, a symbol of resilience against a racist system. Others saw Cooper as a scapegoat, sacrificed to appease the mob. America had split along familiar fault lines, but this time, the fracture had a face. One evening, Alicia watched the protest from her office window. Thousands of candles flickered across the courthouse lawn. A choir sang softly, their voices rising like prayer. "We shall overcome." Inside, Emily whispered, "They're here for you." "Judge." Alicia shook her head. "No, they're here for justice. I just happen to be wearing its face right now." But she knew the truth. Faces become symbols, and symbols ignite revolutions. The FBI investigation accelerated. Subpoenas flew. Internal affairs files leaked. Every skeleton in Cooper's closet came rattling out. Complaints long dismissed as unsubstantiated. Arrests overturned quietly. Settlements buried in county budgets. The house of cards was collapsing. And as the nation screamed over whose side to take, Judge Alicia Brown braced herself. Because she knew the next battlefield wasn't the streets or the news cycle, it would be the Senate floor, and the entire country would be watching. The Capitol dome gleamed under a crisp autumn sky as motorcades wound their way toward the marble steps. Protesters filled the National Mall in a sea of banners and chants that could be heard inside the hearing rooms. Half the signs bore Judge Alicia Brown's bruised face framed by the words, "Justice for All." The other half carried slogans like, "Back the Blue" and "Stop the Witch Hunt." America had arrived at its boiling point. Inside the Hart Senate office building, cameras clicked like gunfire. Reporters swarmed hallways, microphones poised for every whisper. This wasn't just another oversight hearing. It was the event, a national reckoning wrapped in polished mahogany and C-SPAN coverage. The Senate Judiciary Committee room buzzed with anticipation. Senators filed in, some with grim determination, others hungry for the spotlight. At the witness table sat three figures who embodied the storm. Judge Alicia Brown, robed in black with her gold trim gleaming under the lights, bruise on her cheek fading but still visible. Officer Brian Cooper, pale, his once proud uniform replaced by a plain suit. His badge surrendered days before. Chief Judge Eleanor Davis, there to represent the judiciary at large, her expression unreadable. Behind them, a gallery packed with activists, reporters, and ordinary citizens held its breath. Senator Thomas Whitaker, chair of the committee, banged his gavel. This hearing will come to order. Today we address allegations of police misconduct, judicial assault, and systemic bias exposed by recent events at the Jefferson County Courthouse. The room went still. Whitaker turned to Alicia. Judge Brown, the nation has seen the footage. But beyond the video, this committee seeks the truth. Please tell us, in your own words, what happened that morning. Alicia folded her hands and her voice steady. Senators, what you saw in that video was not an isolated incident. It was the visible symptom of a disease I have witnessed for 23 years on the bench. Unchecked power, systemic bias, and a culture that allows officers like Brian Cooper to believe they are untouchable. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. She continued, I was assaulted, yes. But more importantly, I was treated the same way countless citizens have been treated. Citizens who lacked my robe, my title, my platform. What happened to me happens every day. The only difference was that this time, cameras were rolling. Her words struck like hammer blows. Then it was Cooper's turn. His lawyer adjusted his tie, whispering in his ear before nudging him toward the microphone. Cooper cleared his throat, his voice cracking. With respect, senators, I never intended harm. I was following security protocol. I didn't know she was a judge. I thought she was suspicious. Suspicious? Interrupted Senator Angela Ramirez, eyes flashing. Suspicious how? Officer Cooper? Cooper hesitated. Her behavior, her attire, or was it her skin color? Ramirez shot back. The chamber erupted with gasps. Cooper's face reddened. He stammered. That's not what I meant. Answer the question. Ramirez pressed. Would you have called a white woman in business attire a filthy animal and slammed her into a wall? Silence. Cooper's jaw worked, but no words came. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the sweat beating on his forehead. As the questioning intensified, secrets unraveled. Senator Whitaker held up a thick binder. This committee has obtained records of 47 complaints filed against you. Officer Cooper, 47, most dismissed as unsubstantiated. Yet the language in those complaints mirrors the language you used against Judge Brown. Aggressive, animal, resisting. Do you deny this pattern? Cooper shrank into his chair. His lawyer muttered objections, but the damage was done. Next, Senator David Cho, usually measured, leaned forward. Internal documents show the police department paid over $2.3 million in settlements tied to your conduct, taxpayer money, silencing victims. Do you still call yourself a protector of the public? Cooper's silence was its own confession. Then Alicia struck. She stood, holding up a tablet. With your permission, senators, I would like to submit new evidence. The screen flickered to life. Body cam backups, audio recordings, transcripts of Cooper mocking defendants. Laughter from Miller and Clark as they watched assaults unfold. Each clip drew audible outrage from the gallery. One recording chilled the room, Cooper's voice smug and venomous. These people always think they're above the law. Sometimes you have to teach them their place. The words hung heavy in the chamber, impossible to excuse. By late afternoon, the hearing shifted from testimony to confrontation. Senators sparred across party lines. Some demanded sweeping reform, calling for federal oversight of police departments nationwide. Others accused Judge Brown of politicizing her assault. "Judge Brown," barked Senator Howard Briggs, his tone sharp, "isn't it true you've collaborated with the FBI's Civil Rights Division on investigations? Doesn't that prove bias against law enforcement?" Alicia met his gaze coolly. "Senator, upholding the Constitution isn't bias. It's my oath." Her calm rebuttal drew applause from the gallery, silenced only by Whitaker's gavel. Outside, the protest grew louder. Chants shook the windows. "No justice! No peace! Lock him up! Back the blue!" Helicopters circled overhead. Social media live streams broadcast every second to millions worldwide. Hashtags trended in multiple languages. The climax came as Alicia delivered her closing statement. She rose, her robe a banner of authority, her voice carrying centuries of weight. "Senators, you asked for the truth. The truth is this. Officer Cooper didn't just assault me. He assaulted the very foundation of justice. Every time a citizen is brutalized and silenced, the law itself is wounded. And every time a system excuses that brutality, the wound deepens." She paused, scanning the room, letting silence sharpen her words. "I survived because I wear a robe. But what about those who don't? What about the 17-year-old honor student whose voice was dismissed? The grandmother whose complaint was buried? The doctor arrested outside his own home? Their bruises never made headlines. Their dignity was stripped away quietly. Their justice delayed, denied, forgotten." Her eyes locked on Cooper, who sat trembling, a shadow of his former self. "This isn't about me. It's about whether this nation has the courage to admit the truth and change. Because justice is not a privilege. It is a right. And if it can be stolen on the courthouse steps, then none of us are safe." The chamber erupted. Cheers, shouts, senators pounding desks. The moment would play on every screen in America for weeks. As the gavel fell to adjourn, everyone knew history had shifted. The hearing was no longer about one officer, one judge, or one courthouse. It was about a country staring into its own reflection, ugly, undeniable, and deciding what came next. And Alicia Brown, bruised but unbroken, stood at the center of it all. 6 months later, Washington, D.C., carried the weight of a nation that had been forced to look at itself in the mirror. The storm had not passed quietly. It had torn roofs off institutions and left truth scattered in the sunlight. The Jefferson County Police Department, once untouchable, was now under federal oversight. Dozens of officers had been terminated. Brian Cooper, once smug behind his badge, sat in a federal penitentiary, sentenced to 25 years. His name became shorthand for everything broken in policing. The Senate hearings had turned into legislation. A sweeping Police Accountability Act passed with bipartisan support, mandatory body cam backups, independent review boards, and federal tracking of officer misconduct. Some senators called it the Brown Bill, though Judge Alicia Brown herself never claimed ownership. The community changed too. Those who once feared filing complaints now spoke openly. Victims of past misconduct saw their cases reopened. Wrongfully convicted men and women walked free, blinking against the daylight they thought they'd never see again. At the Jefferson Courthouse, the very steps where Alicia had been slapped, crowds gathered weekly. Some came to protest, some to pray, some simply to remember. The building had been renamed the Alicia Brown Federal Courthouse. A bronze plaque at its entrance bore the words she spoke in the Senate chamber. "Justice is not a privilege. It is a right." For Alicia, life had shifted into something both heavier and lighter. She returned to her bench, bruises long healed, but she never hid what had happened. She kept the robe with the faint stain from that morning, the fabric where Cooper's hand had struck her, folded in her office as a reminder of what was at stake. Every ruling, Every gavel strike since then carried a deeper resonance. Lawyers who stood before her felt it too. She was no longer just Judge Brown. She was the judge who had survived, fought back, and forced the system to change. But with heroism came criticism. On cable panels, pundits accused her of grandstanding, of politicizing her assault. Police unions still ran ads painting Cooper as a martyr. The country remained divided, yet Alicia never flinched. Division, she told a law school auditorium packed with students, means the truth has finally pierced comfort, and comfort is the enemy of progress. Her speeches became viral in their own right. Clips of her warning, justice delayed is justice denied, but justice delivered is justice for all, spread across TikTok and YouTube, racking up millions of views. Young activists wore shirts with her words. Protest songs sampled her Senate testimony. She had become a reluctant icon. Meanwhile, Emily Foster, her young clerk, followed her mentor's path. She left for the ACLU, specializing in civil rights law. "You showed me what courage looks like," she told Alicia on her last day. Alicia hugged her tightly, whispering, "Now go multiply it." Bailiff Thomas Green, once shaken by his role that morning, found new purpose too. He joined community oversight boards, teaching citizens how to hold law enforcement accountable. He often joked, "I went from carrying a gun to carrying minutes of meetings, but this work saves more lives." And Brian Cooper, the man who once sneered filthy animal at a federal judge, now spent his days in protective custody. Other inmates knew his story, his assault replayed on TVs across the prison yard. He was no longer predator, only prey. The irony was brutal, but fitting. The story's ripple traveled far beyond Jefferson County. International headlines hailed it as a turning point in American justice. Activists in London, Paris, and Johannesburg carried signs with Alicia's face during marches against police brutality in their own countries. She had become more than a judge. She was a symbol, proof that even in the heart of a broken system, accountability could emerge if truth was dragged into the light. One evening, Alicia walked alone through the courthouse halls. She paused at the bronze plaque with her name etched in permanence. The same steps where she once lay bruised and cuffed now bore candles and flowers left by strangers. She whispered to herself, "This was never about me. It was about them. All of them." She touched the plaque gently, then turned and walked back inside. There were still cases to hear, still lives to weigh, still justice to pursue. The work never ended. But now, millions of people believed again that justice could win. If you believe justice should never depend on power, skin color, or title, share this story. Hit that like button if Judge Brown's courage inspired you, and subscribe, because more stories of truth, resilience, and accountability are coming. Justice isn't just a word, it's a fight, and it's one we fight together.